Hello, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Cavalin Day here. Popping in to do a quick video about something that I have been posting on social media about this week. And so I wanted to hop in here and talk to you guys about something called the baggage activity. If you have not seen this, it has been circulating around social media a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of background, but I do want to make a point that I'm going to springboard on the baggage activity, but it's about that actual activity. But it's really about the theme that comes up when we talk about that activity. So a little bit of background. The baggage activity is a post that's kind of scrolling around through social media. We're a classroom teacher. And I do not know this teacher. It's not a teacher I'm familiar with, so I'm sure she had really great intentions. Did this activity in her classroom. And the activity was basically giving all of her classroom students a scrap of paper. And she basically opened it up and said she wanted them to write down on a piece of paper. And her words are whatever was bothering them, what was heavy on their heart, what was hurting them. She wanted to open up this conversation. She had them not put their names on the paper. Good idea. Ball up the paper and then put it into, throw it across the room or something. And then each of the kids went and opened up a paper and then they were to read what was written on the paper. Now, the reason I say it's not necessarily just about this activity, because I think we do a lot of activities like this that maybe are not exactly this activity, but they're really designed with the same intention. And I really believe that the intention of this was good. I think the intention of this was to build connection with students and relationship with students, which I really am a fan of. And I think the intention was to make her students, maybe open a dialogue in the classroom, which I think can be a really good thing. But we have to be careful that we don't go too Pinterest crazy with what we're trying to do in the classroom. Because I think that there's a question of intention versus potential. And the potential for this to go horribly wrong for these students is really high. The post that is circulating, which has gotten lots and lots of buzz. Let me see here if I can see. I can't see exactly how many people actually saw her post, but I think there was probably hundreds and hundreds of people at that time when I saw it. Probably more now. Let's see if I can see how many people have seen it. It's now been liked over 472,000 times. So as you can imagine, it has been seen by millions and millions of people. And I think the intention of it is great. The intention to create that relationship, to connect with students, I think to open a dialogue about the fact that this is a safe space. I think that's really, really wonderful. But I think the potential of this is so dangerous that we have to really be clear about what is our lane and how to stay in it. So some of the things that were mentioned that kids wrote down were everything from, I'm being bullied to, my parents are on drugs, so I don't have anywhere to sleep. Really, really challenging, difficult, traumatic things were being shared by kids. So one, that's kind of a credit to the fact that they felt comfortable in that space. So there is a little bit of credit there. The challenge, of course, is now this is out in the open. There was no conversation about informed consent. There was no conversation about what happened after they left the classroom. There was no conversation about how these children were supported by other teachers in the building. There was no conversation about what counselors were available to these students to process these feelings that were now up and raw. There was a lot of talk about kids crying, kids who hadn't written their names on the paper suddenly owning that this was their story. Other kids hearing their stories, being overcome with emotion. And so I can only imagine the energy of this room was palpable, right? That the energy in this room had to have been so high with so many kids who are just raw and really taking in way, way more than they probably even should in the middle of the class, in the middle of a school day. And so while I think it's critical that we take time to build these relationships and open a dialogue for kids, I want to make sure that we do what I'm saying when we stay in our lane, right? I tell people a lot, don't tear down a fence when you don't know what it's holding back, right? I want children to feel safe, and I want them to feel comfortable, and I want them to feel open with me. Those are great things. But the truth of the matter is, the classroom setting where there's 20, 30, 40 kids in a room, I don't have the ability to give them the one-on-one attention that they might need if they've now remembered a trauma or been triggered into an emotional state. I don't have the ability to give them in that moment what they need if I'm the classroom teacher. So if I just tell them, hey, let your guard down and tell me everything that's hurting you, and now I don't have a way to give them what they need to protect themselves, that's a really vulnerable spot to be in, okay? The other thing is, I don't know what the rest of these students are going to do with that information. Maybe there's kids in this classroom who've never had anything traumatic happen to them, and they're now traumatized by hearing this story. Maybe there's kids in this classroom who are not in a great place, and they decide that they want to be rude or use this information against someone. What if something comes out that you now have to report, and now this child who has trusted you, who maybe doesn't even have that strong of a relationship with you, has to disclose, you have to disclose something that you've heard or seen. There's just so many potential challenges with this. I really want us to be careful with how we use that. So what do I recommend instead? So what I recommend instead, rather than hugely vulnerability inducing moments in your classroom, I recommend building relationships authentically, right? So you can do a similar activity with, what did you eat for dinner last night? Or what show did you watch on television, or what's your favorite thing to eat, or anything like that, where kids can connect with each other over something that's not quite so vulnerable and challenging. You can also work to build relationships on an individual level, just taking a little bit of time to get to know them, for you versus the teacher, you as the teacher, you as the counselor, you as a social worker. And then the last thing is, make sure that everyone in your building is thoroughly equipped with some basic mental health skills, some basic mental health tools, right? So when you have those basic mental health tools, you're automatically going to think about what's going to happen after this activity. So not just, oh, I hope this will be great and kids will really start to talk and they'll get to understand and maybe they'll be nicer to each other. But for that individual, what does it feel like now that everybody knows the thing that's really hurting me? What does it feel like now that everybody knows that, right? That's a really dangerously vulnerable place to be if you don't have the coping skills to then process through that. So if this is something that you maybe wanted to do in a therapeutic setting, or something that you wanted to do as a part of like a school counseling group, make sure that you have appropriately gauged the children's ability to manage this, that you've talked about the pros and cons of sharing and disclosing things, but making sure that you are also giving them appropriate tools to process this. If you don't have those tools, please make sure that you're reaching out to your administrators and your school leaders and saying like, hey, we know that we need these mental health tools and we do not have them yet. Those are tools that I definitely offer to schools. I have some online options and also some in-person options, but I don't teach anybody to be a therapist. That's not what I'm doing. But I think we all need a basic mental health awareness, and that can come a variety of ways. But when you have that mental health awareness, you understand that something like this baggage activity has the potential to damage more than it does to hurt. So keep in mind that I'm a fan of interventions and activities that get kids up and moving and processing, but we just want to do it in a really safe way. So hopefully you guys have seen that post, and so now you got some conversations to kind of talk about and get out in the open about this type of activity. But if you're looking for other activities that you'd like to maybe try instead, let me know, and I'm happy to pop in the group and share some, and I'll drop some in the group as well. So you guys have a great rest of your day.